PCL. So that's what we're gonna do. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our Champions Sale workshop. And we're so glad to have you here with us this evening. We get to hear from the wonderful Sam Daley-Harris. My name is Tamara Staten. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I am happy to be one of the hosts of this evening's event. I'm just going to share a few points of housekeeping and mention a point about confidentiality before I introduce Sam and turn him over to you or you over to him, however you want to think about it. So this meeting is being recorded. Zoom probably told you that, so that's probably no surprise. And if you would go ahead and stay muted. Actually, Bill, will you just go ahead and mute everybody? And we will have time throughout the presentation.
Tamara, I muted you. So
thank you. Gotcha. Yeah. We will have time this evening where you may have an opportunity to unmute yourself. And if you need to do that, then that's in the bottom left corner. If you would like to participate with us throughout the evening, go to the reactions, little smiley face with a plus, click that, and that's where the raise hand is. You can also send some love from there. And if you didn't know, if you click on the more, you can send palm trees and lipstick and bunnies as well. So feel free to have fun with the emoticons down there. If you do need to stop your video, that's down there too. We would love to see your faces this evening though. If you have the opportunity to be on video with us, we would love to see you. And feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. If you have not had a chance to do that already, let us know where you're calling in from. And last thing I want to say is, for most of you, this is probably repeat information, but I do just want to highlight that whatever is shared this evening, if you choose to share a story about your member of Congress, please do so leaving all pieces of identifying information out of your story. That includes not saying what district you are in. That includes not saying the name of your senator or your representative. We would love to hear the details, but not anything that would potentially ruin the confidentiality and the trust that we have built with these offices. So thank you so much again for being here. Sam Daley-Harris founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby Results in 1980. He co-founded the Microcredit Summit campaign in 1995 and founded Civic Courage in 2012. He coached Citizens Climate Lobby founder Marshall Saunders, many of you may know of, had met the beloved Marshall Saunders. And he also coached Mark Reynolds during CCL's first 7 years. He is the author of Reclaiming Our Democracy, Healing the Break Between People and Government. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to you, Sam. Take it away.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the regional coordinators for inviting me to be here with you. I'm going to actually start with my story of self. If you're not familiar with it, it was developed by Marshall Gans, a professor at Harvard. It's basically what happened in your life and what decisions did you make about those events that got you to this commitment or that got you to this moment. So I'm going to tell my story of self, and then we'll get on with the program. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music, and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught high school music a long time ago. And 41 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby Results. And a lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty, what was the connection? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. I graduated from high school in 1964, and I played timpani in the orchestra at the graduation ceremony. And just before the ceremony, a flute player came back to the percussion section and told me that a high school fraternity brother of mine, a year younger, had died the day before in a tractor trailer accident in Georgia. It was her next door neighbor, so she knew about it before I did. I always say I was 17. When I was 17, mortality was an irrelevant concept. But during the funeral and the mourning period and the like, I went with my friend's younger brother to pick up his report card from the homeroom teacher. And it began to dawn on me that maybe I had 17 more minutes or months or years myself. And the questions of purpose started to come up. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 4 years later, college graduation, 1968, Robert Kennedy's assassinated right around graduation day. And it's another one of this, what is this life? What is this death? Why am I here? What am I here? No answers, but the questions are getting clearer. 9 years later, I always say I'm a little slow. I'm invited to a presentation in 1977 on ending world hunger, invited by my yoga teacher. And I go to this presentation thinking, well, world hunger is inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. And besides, there are no solutions, because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. I go to this thing and it's obvious right away, there's no mystery to growing food or clean water or basic health. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions. Why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from the US National Academy of Sciences, Food and Nutrition Studies, and others calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote them. I don't want to know if you met them, just the name. And if we had a little more time, I might ask, does anyone want to guess out of 7,000 students asked, how many could answer correctly? But the answer is 200 could, fewer than 3%. 6,800 could not tell me the name of their member of Congress. Just over 97% could not. And results grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand, and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the other. So that was a lesson from about 42 years ago. And I just tell it as my story of self. What happened in my life and what decisions did I make around that that got us to this point? So here's the thing. Let me tell you what we're going to do. A lot of times I hear an activist say, well, my member of Congress is so good on my issue, there's no reason to meet with them. Or my member of Congress is so terrible, what's the point of meeting with them? And so in this session, we'll show there's so much more that we can do to have our members lead on our issue, and there's no reason to give up. In a moment, I'll start by letting you know a few ways you can connect with my work, and then I'll ask for volunteers to read aloud slides I'll be putting up on the screen outlining the different levels of the champion scale, starting with opposed. Then I'm going to ask for one volunteer to work with me on one of their members of Congress. And Tamara, I may ask you to do the confidentiality thing again when we get there. A volunteer who's been active in CCL for 2 years or more, a volunteer who's intimately aware of what's been done with that member of Congress. And I'll ask the volunteer to tell us a little bit about the member of Congress they've been in for 37 years, or this is their first session. Tell us where that member of Congress is on the champion scale and what you're using as your evidence for that. And then tell us what you've already done with that member of Congress. we've met with the member of Congress 4 times and the aide 6 more for a total of 10 meetings so far, whatever it is. Then I'll ask the volunteer to tell us what you might do next to help move that member of Congress to the next level on the champion scale. Then we'll ask for others on the call to offer their own suggestions of next step in an effort to help everyone become better coaches. Then I'll offer my own suggestions for what you can do to move the member of Congress to the next level on the scale. Hopefully, as you listen to someone else go through this process with their member of Congress, it will give you ideas of what you can do with your own members of Congress. When we've done that, I'll ask for one more volunteer to do that whole same process again. If the first volunteer was describing a member who's opposed, then I'll want a second volunteer whose member is maybe supporter or at a different place on the scale, so we don't do the same thing exactly twice. And hopefully we'll have time at the end for me to read an inspiring little excerpt from Reclaiming Our Democracy that demonstrates a group moving a member of Congress from opposed to being a supporter, and even in this case, an advocate. So I'm going to get my screen ready, and we're going to ask for a volunteer. And give me 1 second. And there I am. Okay. Okay, great. So before I get my first volunteer, okay, great. I just want to put this out. If you're interested in connecting, you can write to me at sam@civiccourage.org. And if you write your name in the word list, if you want to be added to my Civic Courage mailing list, if you write the word chapters, if you'd like to receive 2 chapters from Reclaiming Our Democracy, including one on the founding of CCL, and slides, if you'd like to receive these slides. So if you'll raise your hand, I'd like to get a reader for the first 2 levels on the champion scale. And if Bill or Tamara could let us know if anyone's raised their hands, I'll ask you, you go down to the bottom reaction, and at the bottom of that, it has raised hand. And I ask you to unmute yourself and give us your name and city, and then read the first 2 levels. Do we have a volunteer?
You can raise your real hand also if you're on
Oh,
video.
real
And I
hands,
will
okay.
look for your real hand hanging out in the air, just hanging out, ready for us to call on you. Oh, there's one. Rob, go ahead, Rob.
Okay.
Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm stepping a little outside of my comfort zone doing this, but anyway, champion scale, opposed. I think we can agree that the farthest you can get from being a champion on our issue is being opposed. A member of Congress or other elected officials who are opposed might say, I don't support that, or my constituents wouldn't support that, or what you're talking about isn't even a problem, or I agree that it is a problem, but I can't support your solution.
Yeah, so some of us, we may get our first volunteer whose member of Congress is somewhere in that zone. Rob, would you read the next one, and then we'll get another volunteer?
Sure, neutral or uninformed. The next level up from opposed is neutral or uninformed. Someone who is neutral might say, I need more information, or can you explain it to me more fully? Or could you give me more materials to read so I can make a more informed decision?
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
See,
So
Rob,
let's-
you've made it easier for Donna to raise her hand. So whenever you're ready for her, Donna, Sam, Donna is ready to read
Okay,
the next
great.
slide.
Donna, do you want to tell us where you're located? And
I'm Donna in Pasadena, California.
okay, great. Why don't you read the next 2 levels?
Okay, supporter. The next level up from neutral is supporter. A supporter might say, I'll co-sponsor that, or I think that is a good solution and I can get behind it.
Great.
Advocate.
If I can
Next.
interrupt for a second, a lot of organizations have their advocates stop there. Co-sponsor, all done, but that's not what we're about tonight or at CCL. Go ahead.
Advocate. The next level up from supporter is advocate. An advocate might say, now that I'm a co-sponsor, I think that it is important to build support for this, or I am going to talk with others in Congress about supporting it, or could you help me draft an op-ed for our paper so we can educate my constituents?
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And let's get one other reader to do the last two levels. And if we could have our volunteer. That wasn't so hard. Who'd like to
Anybody
volunteer?
want to read? Cheryl
Cheryl?
Clark is in the house. Thank you, Cheryl. Go ahead.
Leader and spokesperson. The next level up from advocate is a leader and spokesperson. A leader and spokesperson might be the lead sponsor on a bill or the initiator of a sign-on letter or a caucus on our issue.
Okay, they're leading in some way, but here comes the next one. Go ahead.
Champion. The final level is a champion. I don't like it when groups cheapen the term champion and call anyone who does anything good a champion. A champion who is someone who is so passionate that they are out in front of Citizens Climate Lobby and pushing CCL to catch up. They might say, I have arranged for 5 of my Democratic colleagues and 5 of my Republican colleagues to host town hall meetings on the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And I need your help finding speakers for some of those 10 cities.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Is there a question before I take this down? Does anyone want to raise your hand and have a question about opposed or neutral or supporter or advocate? And remember, people don't just stay. If I'm an advocate, I might take an advocate action. I sign the op-ed and it's published in the paper, and now I'm back to supporter. And I'm not maybe at this moment taking advocate action. So it's not exactly static that if I take an advocate action, I'm now completely and fully an advocate full time. I may just slip back to being a supporter. Any quick questions before I go to our volunteer? Okay.
I have a question, Sam.
Yes,
Actually.
please go ahead.
So some of our champions who we have referred to as champions, maybe they're not having 10 people, finding those 10 people and asking us to catch up to them. So I'm noticing that your definition of champion is a bit different than my understanding of what we've been calling champions in CCL.
Yeah. So it's, for example, like the lead sponsor of the Energy Innovation and a Carbon Dividend Act, I'd call a leader kind of thing. And or the chair of the Climate Solutions Caucus, I'd call a leader. And the question is, for me, a champion is doing something that's off the charts. It's maybe if Mark Reynolds were elected to Congress, what kind of things would he do day to day? I'm making that up. Or Bill Barron were elected to Congress. You know, I kind of wonder if it would go beyond what we're calling and seeing a champion and others. I don't know if that makes sense, but for me, it's someone, if we can imagine it, who's in a sense out in front of us, and in a sense, somewhat pulling us to catch up. I just hold it as a higher level. Let's go on if we could. So I'm going to go over this once more briefly, and which is what I'm looking for. And Tamara, I'm going to ask you to speak up for once again. I want us to have one volunteer who worked with me with one of their members of Congress, a volunteer who's been active in CCL for 2 years or more, and who's intimately aware of what's been done with that member of Congress. And I'll ask the volunteer to tell us, where is that member of Congress on the champion scale, and what is your evidence for that? Tell us what you've already done with that member of Congress. For example, you've met with them 4 times and their staff or aides 6 more times in the last several years or whatever. Then I'll ask the volunteer to tell us what they might do next to help move their member of Congress to the next level of the champion scale. So let's go to our volunteer.
Sam,
Do-
before we do
Yes,
that,
please go ahead.
can we add the champion scale into the chat so that people can reference that starting at the
Well,
bottom?
If you've got it, you can add it in, please.
I will type
do.
it. Can you just tell me in order of bottom to top? As a
Meaning,
review.
Opposed,
Opposed, okay.
neutral,
Neutral, okay.
supporter,
Supporter, okay.
advocate,
Advocate, okay.
leader,
Leader,
champion.
champion. Okay, great.
Okay,
thanks.
great. And so
Mark is ready to share.
Okay, Mark, and so you've been in CCL 2 years or more, and you, in a sense, are intimately aware of what's been done with the member of Congress you're going to work with us on. And then Tamara, do you want to restate the confidentiality piece, and then I'll
Yes.
work with Mark?
Sure. So as a reminder, the relationships that we have with our members of Congress are taken very seriously. And part of the reason that they share so much with us is because we keep things confidential. So we don't want to say anything that anybody could use potentially as a soundbite, the district that we're in, any details that could potentially give away. So no names of senators, no names of representatives, and avoid any obvious details that could give anything away.
Great, and thank you, Mark, for volunteering. Where would you say this member of Congress is on the scale?
Clearly neutral and gets our hopes up every once in a while for being a supporter, but never gets there.
Okay, and what's your evidence for neutral? And maybe even hopes up if you want, but
Yeah, evidence for neutral is we have a good relationship. We get a meeting with our Congress member or staff every time we ask. And so I've been personally doing this for, I don't know, what, 6 years. So I've probably had been in on a total of maybe 20 meetings personally with this office. And it's always
sorry, would you say like 8 of them with, or 6 of them with the member and 12 or 14 with staff, or any?
Yeah, it's close to half and half, maybe a few
great.
more with staff, but it's, yeah,
Great.
so it's been consistent. And what struck in your definition is the request for information. We've been asked by staff to, comparisons with different bills on carbon pricing and to send a memo to the select committee on climate change. And that's all really nice, but they are not co-sponsoring. They're even saying lately, carbon pricing, we could get behind that. We're researching it. So they're in that inquiry mode, but we've been in that inquiry mode for 6 years.
Okay, great. Now, can you say a little bit more about what you've done with them? So one thing you've done is about 20 meetings, about half with the member and half with the member and the staff only, and half with the member and staff. What other kinds of things have you done with that congressional district or member?
We arranged a climate town hall a while back. It was, when we were first all on Zoom. That went really well. And I remember it wasn't centered around the bill. It was just an opportunity for the member to take questions and state their views on climate change. That was well received.
And about how many people attended approximately?
Oh, it's like 45.
Okay, great.
It was mostly CCLers, but not all.
Okay. What else have you done with and the member was there for whatever it was, 30 or 40 or minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Whole time.
Okay, great. What else?
We write a lot of letters, like everybody else here. We write a lot of letters and make a lot of phone calls. And
Okay, so are these letters to the member of Congress and not in this, what you're thinking of, not letters to the editor, which may be
yeah,
separate?
I'm talking about contacts, frequent contacts, and we're
Okay, great.
with the member. We're doing pretty well there.
Right.
I personally contact the staff, my staff contact, close to once a month with something, some follow-up. And, you know, endorsements, maybe we're not so good on endorsements, but we've got a fair number of endorsers in our district, and we've shared that information with them.
Okay,
So-
and I want to throw something out. I really intend to jump in at the end, but I want to throw something out about endorsements.
Mhm.
And I want to give an example. I don't know which endorsements you're thinking of, but I want to give the example of the city council. And in that district, I'm assuming there are many city councils because there are many cities, I'm assuming, I don't know. That very often a group will work hard to get an endorsement by the city council. The chair of the council will throw the hammer down, that passes, and then move on to the next issue. And we don't actually ask the chair of the town council or the mayor to go with us to the next meeting
Mhm.
with the member of Congress to share this resolution that's been passed in the city council, where
Mhm.
the endorsements kind of sit on the list, but don't necessarily make it into the meeting, kind of show up in a more present way. I don't know if you've got any examples where there was a key endorser and they got involved in this way or that way.
Yeah. You make an excellent point. We've done a pretty lousy job of putting endorsers in front of our member of Congress. Made them aware, but
Okay.
we only recently started inviting other elected officials who endorse to our meetings. So that's something we could do better.
Okay, so you've begun to, if an elected official is endorsed, you've invited them to come along to one of your, I guess, Zoom meetings with the member of Congress or their staff.
Yeah, but it's not actually worked out schedule-wise yet.
Okay, just fine, but you're on that road. What else have you done with this member of Congress? I'm going to ask you what you might do next, but anything else you want to say about what you've done to sow the field and get the crop ready?
Follow them on social media, but that, for what that's
Okay.
worth.
Say something about letters to the editor. Do you get a few or a lot?
would-
Do they mention the member of Congress by name,
Yes.
hopefully in a positive light? Give us a little flavor for that.
Yeah, we've had a fair number of letters to the editor, and I would say the majority of the ones that our chapter members have gotten published mention our members of Congress
Okay,
by name, and mention the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act very specifically.
okay,
So I don't think we're great, but I don't think we're horrible in terms of getting those published. We could do more. We're trying to
Okay.
ramp that up.
great. Okay, is there anything else you want to say that, well, I want everyone to know we've also done this in our constituency or with our member of Congress in our congressional district? Anything else you want to add?
Hey, all I can say is I feel like we're well known in terms of CCLs, instantly recognized. I'm personally instantly recognized if I attend an event. So the relationship is good, but I feel like the way you're asking the questions, we've done what the standard stuff, the CCL says you should do these things, and we're not doing anything above and beyond that.
Okay, great. So let's just go to the next question. The question is, what might you do next, which is either a new thing or maybe going back to quote unquote an older thing and doing it in a more focused, present, vital way. What is it that you could suggest you might do next? Which includes, when were those moments that it looked like, was there a certain kind of interaction that gave a boost that you then got a little discouraged when it didn't come off? What would you do next? And have you gotten cues from the member of Congress, things that affected him more or were more impactful and or might work more?
What to do next. That's why I attended this. I wanted to get some
Perfect.
ideas from everybody
Okay,
else
great.
because I feel stuck.
But yeah, no problem. But has there been any idea that's come to your mind since you've been on this call that maybe you didn't quite have as clearly, which is why you came in the first place, or not right now?
I really think the notion of having endorsers have FaceTime with the member is a twist that we've not capitalized on that. We really got to
Okay.
do that.
And could you just give a category of endorser that you might want to go back to and quote unquote re-enroll, or an endorser that you haven't completed getting their endorsement, a category like a really major employer in the district or a key city council or I don't know what.
That's exactly where I think we're going. One of our chapter leaders, who's also on this call, I'll give a shout out to Gwen Hansen, has done a
Okay.
great job getting elected officials in the state government to endorse. And some of them happen to have personal relationships with my member of Congress and know
Okay.
them well. And I would like to make good on the hard work Gwen and her team have done getting these endorsements to get these people into meetings with our member. That's the one thing I really would like to do next.
Great. Let's hold that. Now I'm going to open it up to everyone. The idea here is for you to exercise the coaching muscle, in this case, coaching on moving members of Congress up the champion scale, and offer a suggestion. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. Now you might suggest something and Mark will say, oh, good idea, but that's something we've really actually done. I didn't mention it. But let's hear what others on the call would offer as something that worked for them or something that they would recommend. Do we have anyone who would like to exercise the coaching muscle and suggest an example of a next thing they could do with this member of Congress? Quite honestly, as you're thinking of things you could do with your own member of Congress, it goes both ways. And Rob, do you want to just give us your idea?
Well, what I came across as I was searching the cobwebs of my brain, this occurred before I actually was a member of CCL, but we actually have outreach presentations where we were kind of given, what greenhouse gases were, things of that nature. And it was actually a PowerPoint presentation. And that apparently occurred with our member of Congress and supposedly kind of swayed him from being totally opposed to a little more accepting. But in the long run, it hasn't worked out as well as we'd hoped. It's almost like we need to go back to school with him again, but I don't think that'll happen.
Okay, great. I just want to kind of throw this out, excuse the dog in the background. The thing that I wanted to raise was, I remember there was this CCL group that arranged for a meeting with the top climate scientists from one major state university and the top climate scientists from the other major university. And so, Rob, I'm just throwing that idea about, yes, you could do that, your chapter, but the question in my mind is there some authority in your, let's call it congressional district, the major university, and is there another messenger that you might also think about, the meteorologists from the local TV station, just thinking about any of those kinds of ideas to add to your suggestion?
Well, people from one of our chapters close by, actually, he was a scientist, so we had a little bit of clout. And like I say, this happened before I was a member. We had a scientist, an engineer, and, some learned people that were
Yes.
speaking and presenting.
Yep.
And that was actually a plus from what I heard. And they were very inspired and hopeful that he was going to come around 100%. But
Okay.
it's kind of slowed down a little bit.
Okay, great. Clear. Who'd like to raise their hand? Okay, is Eileen, do you want to offer your suggestion?
Yes, something that worked for someone else was to do a En-ROADS presentation to the legislator and let them see how carbon pricing, how much it affects the overall solution to climate change, to global warming.
Okay.
So that seemed to work in one situation.
Okay, so both of you are suggesting a kind of deeper dive on climate and the science of it, et cetera. Okay, great.
I had one other thing, if I
Yes,
could.
please go ahead.
Okay. I was just wondering, I might have missed it, but I'm wondering if he's able to figure out why the reason he's not supporting. Does the representative give any reason for it?
Okay, great. So let me add this. If I was working with someone who's opposed, which we were sort of up toward neutral or and the like, but when I'm working with a group and we're considering a member of Congress who's opposed, I have the group write these three things down. I know you don't support this legislation. What would it take to change your mind? Number two, can you say more about that? Number three, why do you think that is? And so that's a variation on, I know you keep getting close to coming on board. So at the moment, it looks like you're not ready and you don't support it enough yet. What would it take to change your mind? And that's a question you could ask of the staff. Who is it that really has the congressperson's ear? Who is it that is quite influential? That's a whole other line of questioning with the staff. Let's go to Andrea, and then I might offer a few suggestions and we'll go to another volunteer. Andrea, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, Ellen said what I was going to pretty much say, which is because I've done a lot of things. I was in big business, and the first thing you do is you approach the person, if you have a good relationship, and say, hey, it sounds like you're getting really close, and I really appreciate you listening to me. What would it take to make you comfortable? I like to use the word comfortable for very specific reasons, to go to the next step, because every person has different things that motivate them, and you need to figure out what motivates that person and give them what they need.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm going to go back to Mark for a moment, and we're going to wrap it up and go to another person. So Mark, let me ask a few other questions about how many letters to the editor a year are published that mention the member of Congress, maybe others by name, hopefully in a positive light. Give me an approximate number.
I'm going to guess that we probably, if you discount the really small papers that publish everything, things like the major paper in our area, we're probably getting 4 a year tops. They fail to publish the majority, of course, what we send them. But
okay,
it's
so let me ask a question.
thing.
And it's pretty much mentions a member of Congress in a positive light. Okay, great. So my question is, when a letter is published like that, does it always get sent to the member of Congress, in particular, the key aide? And is there always a follow-up call to discuss the content of the letter with the aide, let's say?
We've been haphazard on that. I've
Okay,
sent copies of some, but not always.
okay, great. I would recommend that, that we be intentional about the letters published.
Mhm.
We post it on social media. We send it to the member and particularly the key aide. And we follow up with a brief, you say you talk once a month. Well, certainly that could be one of the triggers or reasons for your conversation with the member of Congress. Um, Can you envision uh, uh, that there will be a special, it's almost like a mini town hall meeting of endorsers that you bring the endorsers, you brief them first. You don't, they endorsed it, but that was 7 months ago or 15 months ago, and they kind of forget what they endorsed, kind of thing. So you really want to get time with them to do that. So let me ask another question. Can you say someone who has a lot of influence with the member of Congress for some reason, either because their business is big in town or because they're a big contributor to the campaign or because some other reason, can you say that you're aware of some key influencers with the member of Congress, people he or she really respects, and let me call it really listens to? Are you aware of some of those people?
Yes, and some of those people have not endorsed who've been asked.
Okay, yeah. And ones, I think you're particularly aware of like state legislators or elected officials. And I'm also asking about other categories.
Businesses, yes.
Okay, yeah. So I would really urge you to, uh, the dance has gone on for a while. It's kind of time to up the ante in terms of deepening the outreach, you might say, to bring them along. And I think a lot of that lives in finding people who have the highest level of regard and respect from the member, enrolling them. Frankly, you'll enroll some and some will take a lot longer, but not just enrolling them to be a name on a list, but enrolling them to step up with you and be engaged. Maybe they'll sign an op-ed, maybe they'll come to a meeting, maybe they'll bring relationships of theirs in the door as part of their work. So Mark, let me just stop there. Thank you. We're going to do a similar thing with one more person, but I'm going to ask for someone whose member of Congress is a supporter. They're not opposed, they're not neutral, but they're a supporter. And maybe they've taken an advocate action, maybe they've led on something, but I want to work with someone who would say and give us their evidence for why this member of Congress is a supporter, and very briefly what you've already done and what you might do next. Do we have a volunteer who would do a job like Mark just did, but with your member of Congress who's a supporter or maybe higher, and walk us through what you've done and what you might do next to not only deepen the support, but move it to advocate and move it beyond advocate to leader and beyond. Do we have someone who's got an elected official who is that supporter? And maybe there's been a little bit of running in place with them because, well, they're so good. What do we need to do? I mean, look, they always say yes. Anyone willing to volunteer?
Anybody? Anybody? Bueller? Bueller? No, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I saw one smile out there for those of you who are on video. Thank you, Derry. Awesome. And Don is laughing. Yes. All right. Anybody? Don't be afraid. We'll be
I
nice
love
to you.
silence.
We promise not to. Oh, he likes the silence. I should stop talking.
I could try
Yeah.
and do it.
Okay, great. So would you say that your member, whoever you're working with, is a supporter, or sometimes they even do advocate actions? Where would you put them
I
on the
would
scale?
put them as a supporter, not a co-sponsor, but a supporter. And that's been
Oh.
pretty recent that they've got to that level of supporter.
Okay. Um, let's see. Now, would you say that you're within a month of there being a co-sponsor, or no, this could go on for years? Do you have any
Um,
sense of that?
He has a technical reason that he uses for not being a co-sponsor. So that's probably not going to happen because of his position in Congress. He doesn't want to
Oh,
do
okay,
that. So,
okay,
but I still
okay.
think he could be
Well, let's
doing
stick with
more.
it. Let's stick with it. Yeah, okay, great. So can you just give us very briefly an idea of some things you've already done with this person? Meetings with them, the number, letters to the editor, other kinds of things?
We meet with him. He meets with us twice a year regularly. Anytime we ask, and maybe even 4 times a year, because anytime we ask him for a lobby meeting, he meets with us.
The member,
So,
not the staff only.
yeah,
but-
the member. He's
Okay,
like
okay,
really good about that.
okay.
Um, we write letters to the editor. We probably
About how many get published about that mention him by
maybe
name?
that mention him. That mention him, not that many. I have to
Okay.
admit.
But
Yeah.
would you, how many are published and how many mention, like 10 are published and 2 mention him? What kind of ballpark?
I would say approximately 2 a month, and I would say, I mean, just over the years, I think maybe only, well, I don't know, maybe a third mention him.
Okay, so we're talking about 24 letters to the editor, maybe published each year, and a third mention the member of Congress. And in a positive light, could I ask you this question? For me, a positive light is the member of Congress has been quite a leader in this area. And we hope that he or she can bring that same kind of leadership to climate change or to the energy innovation. So if they're really acknowledged for something they lead on that you care about, it's not a baloney acknowledgement, you care, that they support that. Would you say your letter to the editor writers are clear about that possibility, what it is that they would legitimately acknowledge and love about the member of Congress?
Oh, yeah, there's
Okay.
plenty, yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to skip on ahead and ask you to tell us what you think you might do next to move them to the next level.
Well, we are stepping up. I'm a co-liaison, but someone who's not a co-liaison is kind of stepping up the asks that we're making. So, the other co-liaison and I are fine, go ahead and do that. So I think that's going to be helpful because he's starting to be more of a supporter. So, and he did do one thing. He wrote, he encouraged, we had a business person at the meeting, someone he could really relate to. She wrote a letter, op-ed, and he put a quote in it. So that was good participation. He didn't mention carbon pricing, although her op-ed was a lot about carbon pricing. So even though I didn't mention it, his name was there in a letter to editor about carbon pricing.
Okay,
So.
let me ask this question. The question is, the technical problem is not a technical thing in the bill. It's where they sit in Congress is there. Okay, good. So my question is, are there other members of Congress in a similar kind of a position, but they are co-sponsors. In other
Yes.
words, and are you aware of that? And is he aware of that? You're aware of that? Or
But he just says, this is my policy.
okay, great, not a
This is
problem.
my policy.
So my next
Yeah.
question is, he gave a quote for her letter or op-ed, which was a great sign. My question
Mhm.
is, could you see him or her agreeing to have a letter to the editor published in the paper expressing their support with the importance of doing something on climate, the importance of doing this on climate, price, et cetera. Has that request been made that they step out, well, not a co-sponsor, but speak out in some kind of public way?
Mhm. Yeah,
Have they
yeah, maybe
declined?
not. We did ask him to do, well, let me think. I don't know that we've specifically asked him about, like for him to write a letter to the editor.
Or op-ed, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, we only got so far with the op-ed, but but we could ask him if he would be interested in writing an op-ed, or a letter to the editor. See, up till now, he's been very reticent to advocate for carbon pricing. It's only like in the last month that
Right,
he is publicly stated anything about carbon pricing.
right,
So
okay,
it's new because before
okay,
that, I don't think he would. But now, we might have an opportunity to move him forward on it
okay, great.
since
So
he,
I'm going to offer a few suggestions, and they live in all of us getting more aware of who has the most impact, who has the most influence, who has the most leverage with our member of Congress. So is it a climate scientist at the local university? Is it the meteorologist on the evening news kind of thing, the weather person? Is it a major employer in the district? Is it a city council as a body who has a closer ear to the ground of constituents? Is it, where are the other elected officials? Where are these lever points where people whom he already knows and respects, or if he met them, he would bring an automatic respect to them? And are we enrolling them in a way that they are not just a name on a list, but instead players in the game, let's say showing up at a meeting with the member of Congress, or that kind of thing, or ask him, as I think it was Mark said before, did a town hall meeting with their member of Congress. Would he do something like that and thing? I'm going to close with this, and I'm going to say for anyone who's interested, but I'm going to close with this reading, and it's from Reclaiming Our Democracy. Sorry, share this so you can know this if you want it. If you're interested in being added to my Civic Courage mailing list, send me an email at sam@civiccourage.org. Write your name and the word list if you want to be on the list. Chapters, if you'd like the 2 chapters from Reclaiming Our Democracy, including one on the founding of CCL, and slides, the word slides if you'd like the slides. This is an excerpt from Reclaiming Our Democracy. The person speaking is Steve Volk, who was the first media coordinator at CCL. And this is from 1985. There was a famine in Ethiopia, and his member of Congress was one of a very small number who voted against famine aid for starving people in Ethiopia. And Steve begins, have you ever seen fans of a really bad sports team who sit in the stands with bags over their heads because they're so ashamed to be seen rooting for such losers? If politics were a sport and we were sitting in the stands watching our congressman playing on the field, we would be in the stands wearing those bags over our heads over the shame we felt for having Pat Swindoll as the representative. Our thoughts and discussions about him were very negative, and we pretty much wrote him off, figuring out the best chance was that maybe he would be defeated in 2 years. But at Sam's suggestion, we began to shift our thinking on Pat. There was a prayer Newton Hightower had written for his member of Congress, Bill Archer in Houston, someone he had similar difficulties with 2 years before. We adapted it to Congressman Swindoll and added his name. This is the prayer they would read at the beginning of every meeting. Thank you, God, for Pat Swindoll. We know he's a good man who wants to do right in the world. We know he struggles with the same problems we do, closing our hearts to those who don't agree with us. There are no thoughts and feelings that we've had that he hasn't had, and vice versa. We pray that all of us learn compassion for people in our country and far away, for rich and poor. We pray that Pat and we will be less frightened of each other. We pray our focus will be more to love and appreciate him and less to change him. Help us remember that sharing love with the world is the highest contribution we could make and will lead to children being fed and the planet surviving. Forgive our righteousness and anger. Open our hearts and minds to find the next expression of love for Pat that he can receive. And Steve said years ago on a conference call, we would read this prayer at our meeting and go, yeah, right. And then we'd read it at the next meeting and we'd go, fat chance. But then we kept reading it and it began to sink in and become real for us. And they would meet with the congressman with a handshake and a smile rather than a scowl, and begin to educate him slowly over 2 years. And in the spring of 1987, he continues, Results launched its microenterprise legislation with the Self-Sufficiency for the Poor Act. We decided it was time for an office visit with Pat, and 4 of us took off time from work to go see him. It was late afternoon. We must have been a sight, sitting in his waiting room with a TV and VCR to show him the Grameen Bank video. Earlier in the day, feeling very confident, I told Sarah that after Pat agreed to co-sponsor, I'd ask him if he could write an op-ed piece in support of the bill. I don't know, Stephen. I think that would be pushing it. But I figured once he's committed to the bill, what did I have to lose? The 4 of us piled into a small office, set up the TV and tape. Remember tapes? We all took a deep breath and the congressman joined us. Everyone spoke brilliantly in the meeting. As we were showing the video, Pat was sitting on a desk, knees drawn under his chin, staring intently at the screen. We told him about the tremendous opportunity of the Self-Sufficiency for the Poor Act and asked him to be a co-sponsor. I'd be delighted to be a co-sponsor, he said. Sensing we were on a roll, I began to ask about an op-ed, but before the words were even formed in my mouth, the congressman spoke. You know, I think it's important on an issue like this that we try to build public support in the media. I have a column that appears in the local paper, and I'm thinking maybe you could write a piece about the bill and we could run it in my column. Do you think you could do something like that? I glanced over at Sarah with a smile so wide it hurt. Pat, I'd be more than happy to do it. I was now ghostwriting for a man who 2 years earlier voted against famine aid for Ethiopia. We were probably the only lobbying group in Georgia that could get Pat Swindoll and Liberal Congressman John Lewis to co-sponsor the same bill. That experience changed me. I now see that everyone has the potential to do the right thing if given the opportunity. It's refreshing to see people as possibilities rather than as obstacles. And that is the end of that segment. And so I am back to you. I think we are right on the nose. It's been an honor to be with you. I'm grateful for our time together. And Thank you so much. And I'm going to leave this slide on the screen once more for anyone who'd like to share. Thank you and good night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Sam, for being with us again. If you do want to get on Sam's list or get the slides or receive 2 chapters of book, email sam@civiccourage.org, which I put in the chat. Also, Bill and I will do our best to be able to upload this recording and put it somewhere where you will be able to find it. So we're working on the details of that, but very likely you will be able to go to community and search Mountain West regional presentation or GPNW or regional presentation or California regional presentation. And you just scroll down to your region and click on the YouTube channel that is applicable to, it's going to very likely be in the Greater Pacific Northwest Regional Conference's YouTube channel. Okay, so if for some reason you want to go there and check it out, do that, but we will do our darndest to email you and let you know. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.